Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Fired Up. My name is Morgan McLintic, and today we're going to be talking about brand experiences in an AI era. And to do that, I'm joined by Ian Lipner. Hey, Ian, how are
Hi,
you?
Morgan. I'm doing great. I'm excited about this conversation. I like talking about AI.
So we're seeing AI search really impact organic traffic for a lot of websites now as people answer their queries within tools like ChatGPT and Perplexity. But your website is still super important. Even if you're getting less traffic, what should you do then to convert that traffic or to make the most of it, give people a great experience? And so AI is here to stay, but we need to respond as startups. So we thought we might unpack that conversation today, right, Ian?
Yeah, I think we're going to hear about taste from people with great taste.
That's right. We're going to be joined by the team from Punch, which is Brian Tillman and Joe DePalma. And Punch is a creative and design agency, and they have a real specialism in cybersecurity. They work with brands like Blackbird AI, Black Cloak, Fortress Security, ID Me. So some big names in cyber, and that's obviously a very competitive space. And we're going to be talking to them. I want to hear a little bit about how they make brands stand out. I want to understand what they're seeing in terms of creative trends. And also, let's talk to them a little bit about design and how that is being impacted by AI too, right? Because the way that they do their work is no doubt changing enormously.
Yeah, we've got the words, they've got the design. This is going to be fun.
All right. So please join me in welcoming Brian and Joe to Fired Up. Joe, Brian, hi, welcome to Fired Up. How are you?
I'm doing great.
It's great to see you. And today we're going to be talking about brand experiences in this era of AI. AI search is here. It means websites are getting less traffic. Perhaps it's more highly engaged. This is a trend I see increasing every month. Brian, maybe I can come to you first. From a sort of web and design perspective, what does this mean for startups?
If we reel back the clock a little bit to the discipline of SEO, I've always been a little skeptical of SEO to begin with, because if you get 5 SEO people in a room, you have 10 opinions on what the best practices are. And it's always been a discussion and a debate. And everybody's always tried to stay ahead of Google's algorithm and try to outsmart the system. We've always advocated it comes down to producing high quality content for a human audience, doing it frequently and making sure it's checking the boxes for Google. But in the era of GEO, of Gen AI search, my understanding is a very different discipline, that what you put out on your website is important, but it's the conversation around the brand outside of the property that you own and control that is really influencing Gen AI decisions. Interestingly enough, we had one of our first Gen AI or ChatGPT search leads come in recently, and they had looked up some very specific parameters of the type of agency that they were looking for. And it was almost as if he was checking every box of what we do when we had our first conversation. So it was really interesting. But what this means for brands is that things like Reddit comments about your product offering are going to be weighted with a kind of significance comparable to your website content. And that's a pretty big deal, because that means that brands are going to have to be more active monitoring the conversation around who they are and around their properties, rather than just trying to own the message internally. We've been in talks with a really interesting startup that's working on a solution for that, to help businesses understand where they can go out and shape commentary and influence Gen AI search results, probably in a more effective way than SEO ever had been. So it's a pretty interesting time.
It's kind of like the Wild West right now. So you remember back in early SEO days, it was all about gaming the system. So you could get a spam email that says, we'll increase your website traffic. And what they're doing is they're just putting up a bunch of backlinks on another website going to your website. And then eventually Google catches on and they go, wait a minute, you can't do that. You're gaming the system. You're not paying us. You're not paying the engine. So right now we're in that kind of Wild West territory where we're going to see where this lands. Right now, all of our AI interfaces are very similar in how we communicate with them. They're all pulling information in a similar aspect. The gamification and of that content that it's learning from hasn't quite come to fruition yet. What is everybody doing so that they show up first in search? So it's a whole new world we're about to step into.
Yeah, that's interesting. It makes me wonder whether it's sort of even more influential than if it isn't necessarily cited always and it just becomes part of the knowledge base and it's a conversational arrival. A lot of the things that we talk about AI are, we really don't understand how it gets to some of its conclusions and so on and so forth. So talk about a black box. But what we do know is that we still want them to come to our websites. I think about search and I see some wrong answers sometimes. And in those AI summaries, things like that. So how do startups, how do they change their sites to be more engaging for this traffic that comes? And how do they maintain that credibility so that folks know, hey, this is where the right answer is here?
In the realm of AI or search, there's still experience, right? Everything comes down to experience. So as a startup, your website, outside of actually meeting a human or that interface that eventually leads you there, ChatGPT, right? Or, you're going to search for, I'm looking for the best XYZ in this service or software offering. Websites aren't going to change in a sense of brand experience. You want to go there, and most of us can view instant credibility. You're going to hit a website, it's going to load fast, you're going to know immediately what they do. Is it going to stand out from the other 5 results that AI gave them or a search engine gave them? That's not going to change. You need like a high impact website, regardless of where you show up in search, right? I mean, 5 years ago, you're clicking the top 5 websites within your search results, right? ChatGPT or other AI searches may be able to narrow that result based on what that user is inputting, but they're eventually going to click out to that specific website and they're going to experience something. And that's just as important regardless of how you got there. Does this feel like a credible business that I want to engage with? So I don't see a lot of change happening there. I do see a change happening from websites leveraging the actual AI part of things and integrating into their website so that the idea of nothing is static anymore, right? Are we integrating AI tools? Are content management systems like HubSpot, WordPress, Webflow, Squarespace, whatever it is, they're going to start injecting AI so that users, while getting a great branded experience, are getting an experience that's unique to them as they go to the website, and it's ever evolving. So it's not one size fits all anymore.
Even in today's world, you can see the difference between a site that is built specifically for search. Usually it's very dense. Usually it doesn't present the best human experience that it's really intended for search and crawl. This really can open up some opportunities to create an experience that's not search dependent, that's not traditionally search dependent. That's something that's really about an experience and an immersion that can use unique scroll effects and maybe bury or make content revealed versus just present. That's the whole classic, like above the fold concept. Like that is history and it's no longer necessary. And brands can create an experience that's really something distinct and new. And it kind of frees them in a way because it's all about the substance of the site, not necessarily the structure in the same way that traditional search had been.
Yeah, interesting about your above the fold. We say this all the time, right? Like the idea that everything has to be in the first byte. Social media changed that. The experience of scrolling with your thumb and your phone viewport being your experience. What we haven't seen yet is really what's going to happen when AI changes how we interface with everything. I'm a designer by trade, right? To use this app that we're in to record a podcast, I'm going over, I'm clicking, I'm hitting record, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm essentially moving my mouse or my pointer around to execute actions. What we're going to see is a conversational approach to interacting with software. We're not going to point and click. We're going to tell, and it's going to give us feedback. And then we're going to get to where, it's soon going to be, this isn't Siri opening up the app, but that idea of instead of pointing and clicking, you are having a conversation to execute an action in everything that we do, which is going to be crazy. That's going to be the new scroll, right? It's going to be the talk to it, tell it what you want.
Joe, are we at that point though? Because we've had sort of basic rules-driven chatbots on websites. You've had search. Are startups looking to sort of move towards having their own LLM powered interface on their site? And if they are, because to your point, UIs are changing, they're less graphical, they're more sort of chat-based. And if they are, how do you sort of merge and combine that to make it a more natural sort of experience? Because as Brian said, hey, look, the experience, you don't need to make it SEO optimized. There's no such thing as above the fold. But this sort of basic chat interface is very cold, and it's the same for everyone. So how do I merge those two things?
I think it's a combination of both. Like, we all know chatbots have existed forever, right? You go in there, you hear that annoying ding when you get to the site, and you're like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to hear this the whole time? But imagine a world where you're training AI to manage your website, right? You're going to teach it about your brand, right? Right now, you come to an agency or internally, you're going to write blog posts. You're going to maybe pivot a service offering. You're going to tweak the language. These are all kind of SEO gamifications, but you're creating real content. Imagine I go into HubSpot one day and part of their intake is, let's train your brand bot, right? We want to learn about your business and your model and what you offer, blah, blah. And then maybe it makes a website. It's going to look like a HubSpot website. That's where the professionals come in, right? But what's really neat about that is website management, right? So think about, like, after you've deployed your awesome brand, you have a great product, your service offerings really taking hold of the market. Well, nobody wants to go in and, right now we're going into, a company's going into ChatGPT and going, I need 5 blog posts for the next 2 weeks. Here's the subject matter, write me on this. Then we go in, we tweak it, we do this and that. They're doing this all in-house internally. Soon your content management system just going to do that for you. You're going to train it. And then it's going to learn from what's happening in the industry and go, hey, look, we found some really cool stuff happening within your industry. This would be great to talk about. And then you integrate that into social media and it's deploying. I mean, whenever I talk about AI, I think of this as like the .com boom. We're right in the beginning. It's 1998. Everybody's blown away right now, but wait 10 years. We're going to be like, holy smokes. Remember that antiquated style of telling it what to do? It just knows now.
Yeah, I remember when Morgan and I were talking about the debut of the iPhone App Store as that sort of moment where we're like, everything's going to be on here now. I remember like passing in the hallway and just having a 15-second conversation. We're like, yep. The interesting thing that you're saying to me is just sort of how the auditory or verbal interface is going to kind of move forward. And it's going to be up to folks like you to decide what that looks like visually. I mean, we see our little spinning orb. Is it going to be like that, like we get from Siri? Or are people going to want more like humanist? Am I going to want to look at humans? Like, very interesting.
The interesting thing here is, like, it's the method of helping to realize a vision. We're just going with the chat-based interface. Doesn't necessarily exclusively mean voice, but it's prompt-based, it's conversation-based. It's using communication skills to generate something that you want to see. One of the most interesting things about Punch, design is core to what we're doing, right? And design is typically dependent on 2 factors, talent and technique. To be really good at design, you have to have really high talent and really high technique. And there's always a balance. When we're hiring designers, we're always looking for those 2 things and the interplay between both. High talent is always far more important because technique can be trained and talent is something that's intrinsic. And so what's really interesting about this and how these AI tools are kind of democratizing creativity is that the technique part is now becoming less and less important. And it's more about how effectively you can communicate the vision that you have in your mind. And so when you think about the tools that are used to generate imagery, to generate video, even to generate text content, it's a matter of how effectively can you communicate the thing that you want to the machine and to allow it to do its thing. Like, stock photo search has always been historically like just a pain, right? Because there's limited resources. It's a necessary evil. Like, you have to have photos of people handshaking and high-fiving and sitting at computers and doing businessy stuff. It's a necessary thing. And there's limited amount of really good quality photography available. Yeah, it's awesome if you can commission a photo shoot and do something very custom. But for most projects, it's not typical. But now we can literally sit down and with a few prompts, create exactly the scenario that we want to have depicted with pretty remarkable precision. I was using one example the other day where I listed out, clothing, demographics, computer type, lighting style, physical design aesthetic of the room, and just in a paragraph or so. And I was able to generate remarkably believable art, photography representation that makes it so we never have to really do stock photography again, which is kind of exciting because that means each thing is going to be unique. Now, sometimes it takes some refinement and sometimes you get six fingers, but that's just because it's still in its infancy.
Yeah. And those the six finger analogy seems to be going away. What's interesting now where we're at this point, I've just been sharing in our local Slack channel of photos of ChatGPT just upgraded their image composition, whatever. Of course, I'm going to be a Simpsons character within the second I open my browser this morning. But that being said, there's a scalability challenge that we're seeing right now, right? So you can create a suite of guys in a skiff that are definitely American. That's a thing we see all the time. When you see these really good photos, and then you go, wait a minute, those are not Americans, right? There's something a little bit off. They're playing Americans in a photo shoot. They're military, but that camouflage pattern doesn't match American military. To the layman, people don't see that. And that stuff, we see it all the time still on websites, especially in DoD stuff, cybersecurity. They'll show a skiff, and there's always the military intel guy in the room, and you're like, that's a Russian there. But where I'm going with this, while we can describe these really great images and compositions, and we can scale them from a digital aspect, we're still only getting the flat version of them. What I mean by that is that the designer, creative, you very early on, you not only see things in layers, but you learn to build and create in layers. Everything is a layer. We haven't gotten to the point where, who knows, probably 6 months away, I don't know, that I can take the Simpsons version of me and now I can go edit it myself and add my creativity to the thing that I've just changed without a Photoshop hacking. Now I can keep tweaking it, but I'm a creative. I want to get in there. I want to break down the layers. I want to make something that's white into black, red into blue. We haven't quite gotten there yet. So it'd be interesting when you get these essentially sourced files, these builds, these layers that are built so that we can then turn that into whatever we want. So we're bringing the human back into these AI images and creative.
Yeah, that's the key, is all of these are the next degree of tools to realize the vision that we have in our minds. That ultimately it comes down to judgment and taste and vision, and that there's nothing inauthentic that's being created. It's another method of creating. And to create it as a discipline itself is to make something from nothing. And so you're creating something from the formal world of ideas into the real world. And these are just tools to help make that a reality.
Well, you mentioned cybersecurity, and you certainly wouldn't want to have the wrong kind of camouflage on when you walk into certain government contractors who focus on that. I want to switch up the conversation a little bit and talk a little bit more about the startup world in particular. And obviously, you're very strong at cyber, and that's a really competitive sector, as are most startup sectors. You're used to making brands stand out, right? That's what you do there. So how do you go about that now? Can you give us some examples? Not necessarily have to be the futuristic ones you're talking about, but some recent examples of how you're helping young startups in cyber stand out.
One of the biggest challenges with startups is they're both trying to figure out the brand and market fit at the same time. So assuming that the product has really internally, the team has decided who they are and what they're building, then it's just a matter of bringing that out in a creative way. And so what we try to do is boil it down to just a simple key idea. When we meet with founders, we'll work with them and through some guided discussions to try to understand what are those absolutely fundamental principles that define your approach, who you are, your identity, your philosophy, your product value, and try to boil it down to a single concept, and then build the brand design and message system from that single idea. And the reason for that is we have a checkpoint to go back and look. If we're thinking about how we're going to visualize an infographic, or we're thinking about how we're going to make decisions around defining a photography style, if we can boil it back to to connect it in a very clear way back to that single big idea, then we're going to have cohesion across the whole brand. Now, part of that, to answer the question about how to make it stand out, we have to look at the landscape and we have to understand what's going on in their sector. And, so many people are like, we're one of a kind. Nobody's ever done it exactly like we are. We are the most unique. We have no competition. The market is going to be ours. We have a $50 billion TAM, but there's always competition. There's always somebody who's vying for the same dollars. And maybe it's because they don't understand fully that this product has emerged yet, or that there is a new discipline. So what we have to do is really understand the competitive landscape from both a messaging and user experience perspective. And our whole philosophy here at Punch is that message is user experience, that design and content, language and visuals aren't separate entities, that they're really an integrated whole about how you perceive and how you experience something. We had a project recently where we're doing a messaging exercise for a relatively early stage startup who's got a great product, a super interesting company. And when you look at the competitors, everybody's purple and says the same thing. So that gives us at least like a clear baseline from which we need to position against. Show how they're doing something that's different. It's difficult not to work with somewhat competitive brands in our space because everybody's trying to solve a big problem in an incremental way. And so we have to figure out how they're different. Part of it's the founder story, especially the earlier stage startups. We worked with a company last year whose founders were one of the pioneers in AI in security years ago. And so bringing that pedigree into their identity and showing how what they were creating now is a natural evolution of what they had started many years ago, that builds trust and shows proof that they were capable from the beginning. And part of it too is creating a really interesting experience in the website. I mean, for us, it's hard not to look at the website as the core hub of the marketing ecosystem. It's the first thing most people see. It's the first chance you have to shape somebody's perception of the brand. And so we want to create something that really pulls you in to the message and pulls you into the product. That's partly through the physical experience of touch. I use a trackpad, Joe uses the mouse, long running debate, but it's a tactile experience. Even though we're looking at digital media, it's a physical thing. So all those factors together work to create differentiation.
Back to the kind of unforeseen, the Wild West, all of the AI models, the interface is roughly the same. It's based on early stage ChatGPT. It's how we communicate. It's based on pretty much text messaging, right? That's how we communicate. This is MySpace 1.0. If I have to use another analogy, we haven't added the animated GIFs and all the ads and customization of the interface. The idea of a website, is there a new thing that's going to come up that is, I'm talking to GPT and it's pulling from Punch to give me the answer that I want based on what solutions it's trying to find. Like, I'm a early stage cybersecurity startup and I need website, brand, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Let me pull together assets from Punch and we're going to make you some piece of custom creative that will display as a GPT ad within the system. Like there's a whole other, we haven't seen it right now. We're looking at a blank canvas. Nobody's started to monetize the interface of this yet. There's going to be a new social media version that is for GPT. There's going to be a new viewport, right? There's a Vision Pro behind me here. I don't know if it's on camera, but that's a different, when you put on the Vision Pro or you put on a Meta Quest 3, your website has to have that media port for that to render correctly, right? So what is that going to be in AI? What's this new thing we don't know about yet? And is AI doing it for us based on how we coded our website and how we spoke to the consumer and how we designed and coded certain elements? TBD. Should be very interesting to see where that goes.
So we've talked a little bit about how technology is going to change web interfaces entirely. It also occurs to me that sort of over the life cycle of a startup, A, B, C round, let's say, their web presence evolve. And so do you see trends sort of between an A round company and a C round company and the kinds of things that they implement on their websites and the types of projects that you do?
For sure. And for us, there's a different approach that we take depending on the maturity level of the company and where they're at. Partly that's dependent on what their needs are, but it's funding and it's a variety of factors. when an early stage startup kicks off, the most important thing is to just start creating a historical presence. Don't reveal too much information about the product because you're still building it and you're still working with design partners to really define what it's going to be. So it is very appropriate to have a simple, lean landing page website, maybe a team page to show a bit of the validation that comes from the founders. You may start wanting to push some blog content to build thought leadership, but it should be relatively lean. By A round, it's time to build out a robust product section. It's time to build out robust use cases. You might consider audience pages or industries to talk about, who your verticals are. Start building out the resource library of utility content. And then as companies get larger into the post B round, post C round, having like a customer portal that is a closed community of a product documentation that can go a long way, creating a user forum or advisory board forum.
There's a cool to boring scale here. Startup, they want you to know the new kid's in town, and guess what? He's got the coolest sneakers on, and he's got a shirt that you can't even find on the internet. This guy knows what's up. As a company grows, you get more of that enterprise utility. Like this could just fit right into some other platform that, hey, guess what? I hope somebody buys us soon, right? We're ready for acquisition, right? We're going to solve your problem over here. So in startups, it's a lot of fun. A simple landing page doesn't mean not fun and not cool, right? They want to be cool. They want to be different. They want to push the boundaries. They want to push the user experience. But eventually they're going to mature and they're going to evolve. And they don't need to be like, hey, we're here, everybody. We're the cool guys. We actually have some value to add here. And guess what? Our product has evolved. And then that next stage is that boring, I shouldn't use that term, but that enterprise grade experience, right? Like safe and established, right? Navigation across the top, call to action, simple headline. Here's my resources. Here's our team,
There's usually a path of that work also corresponds with a hiring trajectory that most startups have, where earlier they'll start with more of a tactical marketing generalist type person, then later a director level, maybe a VP. And then it's usually by the post B round or maybe even to the C round when a CMO will come in and usually bring their own team and start to convert agency stuff in-house. And it's usually that's where the real change starts to happen. But that's why, for our perspective, like that post A round, post B round is really the funnest time because there's a defined product, there's a defined market fit, there's just a huge opportunity and there's funding and there's attitude and energy to go out and do something really exciting.
Absolutely. I think we agree strongly on our end. And I would say that one thing that strikes me is that there are those companies that do kind of maintain their spirit and maintain their creativity and boldness. And you talk about a really well-defined playbook there, Brian, but are startups over time getting bolder with their creative or are they more conservative?
Yeah, I think they are. You could rewind 1 year ago when we started openly going, hey, you mind if we use AI for this steampunk Blackbird on your website, right? There are companies willing to push the boundaries and they're leveraging technology. They're going like, man, we're seeing all this really cool stuff with AI. Do you guys know how to leverage this? And, you rewind a year ago, we're like, I guess. And then we learned and we went, man, this is pretty powerful. So you certainly see that. I think it's technology driven. I think it's what platform are we going to leverage as whether it's cybersecurity, enterprise grade, XYZ, it doesn't matter. Nobody gives a shit about Facebook anymore. But you're seeing like top brands leveraging TikTok still. I mean, I know we're in this weird limbo phase, but you would never think that a cybersecurity company would be doing Wu-Tang Clan memes and Simpsons memes and all of these other things and putting it on platforms that beyond LinkedIn, right? So that's where we kind of default to as businesses, but they're really pushing the boundaries there. Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, of course, and then whatever new social media is going to pop up. And again, back to my point of AI and that interface, we haven't even seen what that is yet and what we're deploying for. What is that AI social media that lives within the platform that we're leaving Google for and going right into ChatGPT to find our answers? It's eventually going to be there. It's just a matter of when.
I'm interested in the fact that like a lot of prospects right now, they're becoming more hesitant to sort of convert on a standard gated asset, the sort of standard flow that a lot of young startups use to convert. And they're trying to provide more interesting conversion experiences. It could be something more dynamic. It could be a small sort of sidecar product that they drop people into. You just mentioned, hey, you had a brand that wanted to create stuff using AI. What are you seeing in terms of those sort of different conversion events that a startup might want to consider instead of a standard, hey, in their resources section, a gated page, fill in a form?
One advantage of using HubSpot, for example, is the built-in lead intelligence that you get from having your database of prospects being already within the platform. One thing, at least we had done recently for a project, was we'll create a customization module. So within HubSpot, they have this particular client has a pretty deep resources library that's organized by topics. And if a person has already been in the contact system and has demonstrated interest in a particular topic, this module can serve up customized content that's based on demonstrated interest that they've already had. So that's one way to create a personalized experience, but that's dependent on using the database and first-party data that you already have. As far as conversions, I mean, I think that term gets used a lot in the like marketing universe of marketing qualified leads. Did we get enough conversions right now? And there's not always a connection between, what is a conversion and what actually constitutes a sale. And for marketing teams, a lot of people's compensation is dependent on getting those conversions up. And so we create experiences that try to make it easy to get conversions. What we really need to focus on is how does user experience connect to actual revenue generation? And that can be beyond just getting somebody's email address. It's about creating an advocate for the brand that goes out and carries a message forward outside of that website, in the events, in the forums, in the developer communities. We had one project, which was really interesting, where the CMO was kind of lamenting. He's like, there's so much conversation around our product in the developer communities on Reddit and Discord than there is around our website itself. Like, we're getting no activity on the website, but we're getting tons of activity in these communities. So I think we have to reframe what conversion really is in today's world. Yes, one way to look at it is like to complete an email and download a PDF report of this year's most interesting top 5 trips in cybersecurity. Or we can look at how do we create actual advocacy and loyalty and brand fanatics across beyond just that download experience. So I think that's what people should really strive for. Less about like, where do I put this button to make it more effective at getting people to click it? Like, how do I create an experience that's undeniable and memorable?
The marketing need to measure everything tends to simplify things, or want to simplify things. And we see this in media relations. How much does an influencer matter? Those things, because they can't necessarily be tallied up so easily, can sound less convincing to some marketing leaders. And it's exciting to think that, hey, we might have some new indicators coming. We might have some new ways of proving this, because what you've described is, if we take those requirements away, that we ring a bell or whatever it is, we kind of open ourselves up to a lot more creativity and a fantastic experience possibility, right? Because there's just so much more that you can do when you're not trying to squeeze through a specific tube to prove you did something, right? I was going to transition to talk a little bit about sort of making the most of an engagement with a creative agency like yours. So I doubt that you get as many questions about measuring your success as we do in PR, but certainly getting going quickly, being successful, collaborating is important to success. So when a startup engages a creative agency to handle design, web, content, how can they set themselves up for success? How can they be good clients? And what kind of things can they do that stifle your creativity as a team?
Yeah. So good question. And
There's
this
so
is
many
true.
jokes just queued up, Brian.
Yeah. I'll give you the serious answer here. So this is true for startups or for companies at any level. Now, it's a little bit more visceral for startups because founders are typically involved in a very integrated way throughout a branding process or website process or something like that in an early stage. Because oftentimes it may be like 2 or 3 people and
Right.
maybe an outsourced engineering team or something working on a product. So early stage founders have to be marketers and executives and financial officers and all that stuff is just the nature of the game. But one of the most important things that any organization can do, or any leader in any organization, is separate their own personal affinities and perceptions and likes and dislikes from what's necessary for their brand to be successful. I mean, this is like, we all have certain styles and things we like, and music we like, and clothes we like, and movies we like, and books we like to read, things that are somehow like activate an affinity in us, but that may not be the best thing for what the audience of their product needs. That said, how best to engage a creative agency is to trust them as the experts in their craft. At Punch, our team was about 50 people. These people have worked on hundreds and hundreds of brands. These are people who are writers, designers, developers, multimedia producers. These are people who are a little bit special forces. They come in and they know how to be super pragmatic and get the most effective return and the most creative outcome in as efficient way as possible. These are people who are experts at what they do. And so when that expertise isn't fully recognized, when people are seen as a medium between the mouse and the founder, that's not good. So I can give you some examples. We've had some just super awesome projects over the years where we've entered into a partnership with folks and they were like, Punch, do your thing and it will be good. And those are great. A recent success story was a company called Revelstoke, which was started as just a 1-sentence premise. The CTO, Dave McKinley, was another client and left for this opportunity. He's like, hey, we got this idea. It is build a SOAR with a Kanban interface. So a SOAR, the security operations product, and a Kanban interface is unusual for that. They typically had more of a decision tree style playbook interface. And he's like, go forth and let's figure it out. And so we engaged in this like really collaborative process from the very beginning, where it was our team handling user experience, user interface design, their engineering team handling the actual build of the product. After we got a really good version together, then we switched over to build the brand, and we had this really great, the whole feel of this product was that it was really easy and simple to use, and it saved you all this time and effort. And so the whole feel of the brand was almost a sense of relief. We had this like really awesome sunset scene, and it just felt like a breath of fresh air. And within 3 years, they went from seed to sale at a significant return on that seed. And it was the perfect startup journey. And they were just a great partner from start to finish. And it's interesting because the diaspora of the Revelstoke team has since spread, and we've been fortunate to work with a number of folks across multiple projects since then. And that was one where it was just like, we could never build the complexity that they're building. And they recognized that we brought a unique perspective on the human side. And so it worked out awesome. Another great example, well, actually, this is kind of two, is started with human security and then with Blackbird.ai. And that's Dan Loudon, who's the CMO of Blackbird AI, was formerly at Human, the kind of person who puts together teams of very talented people, knowing that the reason for putting that team is to bring the best out of those talents. And it's not to try to get them together to implement the vision that's in here. It's to try to get them to create the best possible experience from their collective skills. And so with Human, we had a really awesome user interface that was all about this idea of knowing who's real. It was about revealing what's a bot and what's not. And that was a very much a tactile user experience type of thing. And then with Blackbird, it was the first time where collectively we decided we were going to go all in on AI generated art. It's an AI company that is doing some super cutting edge research on narrative intelligence around brands and topics and individuals. It's really exciting and cutting edge territory, perfectly appropriate to fully embrace AI and what we did. And so because the brand is this wild, like very like serious looking Blackbird, we used AI to generate all kinds of versions of it and make the eyes glow. And then the interface through the website, as you scroll through, it's like it's almost watching you. And the message is just super bold. The whole thing is a very plant a flag brand play that just came out fantastic. And it's getting, it gets a lot of visits, and it's really defining the industry. That's the way to engage a creative agency. You bring them on and you say, you guys know what you're doing. Do something awesome. And then those are when the best things come out,
It's almost cliche, right? It's like a great partnership is built on trust. That's what it comes down to, and sometimes you may have that trust, but we want everybody's voice to be heard. Like we have multiple discovery sessions, whether it's brand, strategy, technology, creative, whatever We want everybody's input on this future vision of the brand. The problem sometimes is, to Brian's point, is we think we're objective, but we're really subjective. And I like this, and I want that, and I think this works. And we can certainly do all those things, and we can have everybody's input be the most important thing. But when everything's important, nothing's important. And we lose sight of the goal, right? The challenge of an agency is really driving them back to those pillars of the brand, the pillars of the strategy, the pillars of the creative, like what we know is going to work, not what we know we like. That's just a tough sell sometimes. And it's hard for people to shake that when you're building that, because they want to be a part of it too, especially in the startup, whether it's 3 people or 10. I really care about this brand. Everybody at Punch cares about Punch. We want their input, right, on where the business goes. Everybody's a part of this. We need to trust everybody in what we do best internally and with our partners. And that's how you get the best outcome. So
wonderful. Look, Joe, Brian, thanks for your time today. That feels like a great place for us to wrap up. Listen, if people want to get in touch with you, Joe, where should they go?
You can go to addsomepunch.com or punchteam.com. Either or works. You can reach me at joe@punchteam.com and Brian at punchteam.com. I mean, that's what's great about being the founders, right? You get that sweet first name and then at web address.
Listen, Brian and Joe, really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for sharing your opinions on how startups should sort of navigate in this new AI era. It sounds really exciting. There is a lot of change. I think you guys are leading your clients through it. We're excited to see what comes next. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Talk soon.